So, what do?
I'm an annoyance to my superiors, a joke to my peers. They call me Spooky. Spooky Mulder. I'm the key figure in an ongoing government charade. The plot to conceal the truth about the existence of extraterrestrials.
Well, I would say that about does it, Spooky.
It's mutated. Into what?
I can't tell you what killed this man. I'm not sure anybody else could claim to either.
These men have been secretly negotiating a planned Armageddon.
And you have conclusive evidence of this? Yes.
I'm already way past the point of common sense here.
I can't quit now, Scully. I need you on this. It's a global conspiracy with key players, the highest levels of power. It reaches into the lives of every man, woman, and child on this planet.
You've seen more than you should.
Then you must take away what he holds most valuable. On June 19th.
The impossible scenario that we never planned for? Well, we better come up with a plan.
Take your greatest fear.
These people don't make mistakes.
Your most paranoid suspicion.
We have no context for what killed those men.
And your darkest nightmare. And multiply it by X.
So much for Little Green Man.
Trust no one, Mr. Mulder.
What is it?
It's time to go back.
Welcome.
Hey there, welcome back to Generation S. It's a podcast about growing up in the 90s and the early 2000s. And, well, I'll put it to you this way. If last week's episode, all about the X-Files, tickled your fancy, if it titillated you and brought you back to a time when sci-fi in the 90s was really awesome, well, this podcast might be for you. I'm Dan Kemp, joined once again by the returning Beth Kemp, a.k.a. my wife.
Hello, everyone.
And we are back to, honestly, we weren't planning on making this a two-part episode. I'm pretty sure I decided about halfway through recording last week's episode that we were going to split it up because there was so much to say, right?
So much.
The X-Files was a huge part of your childhood in particular, and certainly got a lot of positive reviews from listeners, just further, cementing that it was part of theirs as well, because it is a big thing. And, we were going to talk about the movies, we were going to talk about the reboot. All we managed to cover in a podcast that ended up being over an hour was just the original run of the series from 93 to 2003. So we decided, nope, we're going to go ahead and give this, its due. We're going to talk all about the movies today, and we're going to talk a little bit about the reboot series as well. Share our thoughts on that. But before we do any of that, one of the other things, Beth, that you pointed out from last week was that we actually neglected a few characters that we felt deserved a bit of a kind of a discussion, or at least a shout out.
Yes.
Because we had talked last week. If you listened last week, by the way, if you haven't yet, go back and listen to last week's episode. We had a great time talking all about the X-Files. But part of what we discussed was, some of the protagonists and the antagonists, both primary and secondary, and dare I say tertiary, which is a term I did not know was a thing, but I learned that from our son's English class, actually, his reading class. Did you know what that was? Tertiary?
Third level, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Anyway.
And quaternary, I think that's like the fourth.
Don't get crazy with me.
All
anyway,
right.
But there were a few characters that we realized after the fact that we left out. So let's start there. So I want, before we get into...
I feel like, yes, like, we hit the main ones, but I feel like the other ones that maybe weren't even in, they had such a pivotal role that they definitely deserve to be mentioned.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Well, and characters that really drove a lot of the plot points that, again, we kind of neglected to mention. Like, for example, we're going to talk about, Mulder and Scully's, kind of family members, because a lot of them play a big part in it.
Yes.
But in fact, part of that is just, the fact that one of them is essentially the reason that that Mulder is involved with the X-Files.
Exactly.
So we'll get to that in a second. Before we do, let's highlight some other FBI agents as well. So first we have Diana Fowley.
Yes.
Who was played by
Season 6.
Yep,
Yeah.
Season 6. Well, Season 5 and Season 6, I believe.
Yes, I guess 5 into 6.
Yeah, so which is funny because the movie takes place between, and we'll get to that, but the movie takes place between 5 and 6, and she's not even mentioned or anything.
But they like to that happens. That happens where people are just,
Well, they kind of write her out a little bit in Season 5 to explain why she's not around first. I don't know. But so Diana Fowley, played by Mimi Rogers, also known as
Mrs. Kensington.
Mrs. Kensington from Austin Powers. Lovely lady. Lovely, fantastic actress. I actually thought she was British because of Austin Powers.
Oh, that's funny.
But she's American. She's an American actress. Married to Tom Cruise, actually, back in the day.
Who wasn't? I feel like everybody was at this
Cruise
point.
only been married 3 times. That's not that many.
Only. Okay.
By Hollywood standards, it's pretty
whatever.
tame.
Anyway, I judge her for that.
So Diana Fowley, just to give a bit of backstory, she was an agent from Agent Mulder's past. They worked together. What was it, on the X-Files or pre-X-Files?
I think it was.
Was it when he was with Violent Crimes? Because Mulder used to work in Violent Crimes.
Violent Crimes, but she had she agreed with him on some of the paranormal slant to things. She seemed, and they had a past, that was highlighted or mentioned.
We could say it. It was a romantic involvement, right?
Yeah. They had a past, but it wasn't ever necessarily it was. They danced around it a little bit, or whatever.
So you're right. She was, because if you've seen the show, this. Like Mulder and Scully, I feel like they worked so well together because you had the believer and the skeptic, right? And they played off each other very well, and they helped each other out in seeing the other side of things. Whereas you've got Diana Fowley, who is like Mulder, she is a believer, and so her whole thing is well, you should just
Well, and let's not leave out the fact that she was also part of the conspiracy. Like, she was working with the cigarette smoking.
Well, she was.
She's kind of, a jerk.
No, I mean, so, I would say she was essentially she was an antagonist. She was right. I mean, she was.
Well, and back in the day, I don't think anybody who was a, quote, shipper liked her at all. I know
Sure.
I hated it. And honestly, I saw her on the X-Files before I saw her in Austin Powers, and so it was funny because going back and watching it again, I am not nearly as I loathed her. I hated every episode that chick was in. I was so mad because it was, going against, the Mulder and Scully thing.
Right.
And so then it was funny because when I went back and watched it, all I could think of was I just kept saying Mrs. Kensington.
Yes.
I couldn't help it. So it actually made it better. I didn't hate her as much this go around, but I absolutely loathed her entirely.
Right. But I think, again, protagonist, antagonist aside, just the idea of somebody that was just as much of a believer as Mulder, I feel like in the long term wouldn't have worked out and benefited Mulder.
That's fair, yeah.
Because they would have both just kind of it's kind of like today when you're, on social media and all you do is follow groups that post exactly what you agree with all the time, right? It's just, you don't really progress and learn and grow as a person.
That's fair.
So you think of it like that, where she was, they wouldn't have been worked out together long term because of that, in my opinion. As a non-invested shipper, I would say.
I just hated her.
Well, fair.
I just hated her.
You had some choice words to say about her before we started recording, and I said, "Listen, you gotta let's clean that up before we get to tape."
That is how I felt about her.
I get it. No, I totally get it. So, all right, that's one FBI agent. There's another one we want to highlight, and that is a man named Agent Jeffrey Spender. And I didn't bother looking up the actor's name because I don't think I've ever seen him in anything else. So I don't.
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly,
Agent Jeffrey Spender comes in season 5, much like Agent Fowley, and is introduced as essentially a foil to Mulder and Scully. To kind of
he's a narc. Let's be honest. He's supposed to be a narc.
He's kind of a rookie agent. He's a narc. He is the opposite. He is more like Scully in the sense that he is more of a skeptic, I would say. He doesn't buy into anything Mulder says, but and won't even acknowledge things that Mulder says as far as wanting to believe.
Yes, and he gets very mad when Mulder starts interrogating his mother, Jeffrey's mother, who's
Yes.
a supposed multiple abductee, and things get very, very, very heated, and we find out a little later on that they're actually half brothers.
Yes, because we find out the father of of Agent Spender is none other than the cigarette smoking man, who we then find out later in the series is also the father of
Don't
Agent...
ruin it now.
What? Agent Fox Mulder.
Oh! I thought you were gonna say something else. I was like, we'll get to that.
No. Yeah, no. It's okay. No, he is the father of Mulder, so therefore, ergo vis-a-vis, Mulder and Spender are half brothers.
But we don't find that out until season 9 that they're half brothers.
Correct. Yeah, it's a whole thing.
It's a whole thing. But anyway, so Jeffrey Spender, he does come back in season 9, as we said. He plays a big part. In helping with William and all of that. And he actually comes back in season 11 as well.
Yes, he does. That's
so anyway, yeah, and he turns out like you don't like him at first because he is kind of just
he's kind of a weaselly,
curly-headed fuck.
Yes,
no,
but he's a good guy though.
He is. He doesn't work for the bad guys or anything. He's naive. He's naive and he narcs on everything that they do, and he doesn't want to believe in anything. And that he softens, it changes. Unfortunately, his dad gets his hands on him, and
yeah. So, but and kind of like basically misleads him and lies, and he falls right into it. So I definitely, it's definitely a good call to kind of give these agents their due, because they were pretty significant characters that we just completely glossed over. Not to mention, these family members of Mulder and Scully.
They are. Well, yeah. And so I feel like we have to start out with Samantha, which is the whole reason why we're in this mess to begin with.
Yeah, so let's start this. So Samantha Mulder is the sister of Fox Mulder, and long story short, she was abducted by aliens.
Well,
okay. Fox Mulder believes that she was abducted by aliens. At first. Yeah, and again, we can't, because if we do that, we're just going to have to go ahead and go into the entire mythology, and quite frankly, I don't think we can do it justice.
No, that's fair, but basically, here we go.
For all intents go ahead.
Yes. Samantha Mulder, the sister of Fox, it was a staged abduction, but he believed all this time that it was real, and he basically went from being just kind of everyday life to being obsessed with finding answers, and so that's how it led him to the X-Files and where everything started. He wound up unfortunately finding out that she was part of a cloning experiment, and so he got to at least see a version of her at some point, but then found out that she had passed when she was about 8 years old. But she had lived with Jeffrey Spender when he was about the same age.
Yes.
They were in the same, compound. So he did get a little bit of closure. I felt like it was a little unceremonious. That was kind of my critique of
her send-off.
Yeah, it was just a little weak, in my opinion, after all of like what he had been through and all the other things,
considering it was the driving factor of his motivations for
the whole reason why he was there.
Yeah, and then it wasn't even like a finale. It was like a middle of the season.
Yeah, it was just I don't. It didn't really like the way it was handled.
No, it sounded like basically they're like, we don't really know where to go with this. We need to just button this up and move on and just hope nobody notices.
That's the vibe you get from it.
And so, not a fan of how they kind of progress their story. But again, very significant to the overall story arc, especially in the first few seasons when, as far as the audience knows, she was abducted by aliens and she was cloned, and it's a shit show. So continuing along the kind of the Mulder bloodline here, let's talk about Fox's father, Bill Mulder.
Yep.
So Bill Mulder is part of what is called.
We talked about him a little bit.
We did. Yeah. We touched on him last time. So he's part of the syndicate, along with the cigarette smoking man and a number of other people who never end up getting real names in the show. But long story short, essentially, he kind of softens up, I guess, in his later years on what they're doing and doesn't want to be a part of it anymore. Ends up getting killed because of that by your favorite character, Alex Krycek. And so my biggest takeaway is that he's a big softy and a cuckold, quite frankly.
Oh, Jesus.
Well, yeah, because now, okay, so Fox Mulder's not his kid, we find out. I forget, is Samantha supposed to be his daughter or no?
Yes.
Okay, so that is his biological child. Mm-hmm. She is not the spawn of cigarette smoking man.
Not that I know of, no.
But supposedly is adopted by the cigarette-smoking man when she is abducted, quote-unquote. Because she lives with Jeffrey Spender.
Basically. So it's just a mess. It's just a mess.
It is. It's one of those things where you more than me, because I'm a fan now, but I wasn't back then. But like as an X-Files fan, like, did you forgive that back in the day? Did you just kind of move on from it? Did you not think too much into it?
Yeah, I didn't think too much into it because, like I said, I happened to see everything like kind of chopped up anyway.
Yeah.
So honestly, I didn't really catch some of the inconsistencies till later.
Yeah. Okay.
With that.
Yeah.
But
so that's Bill Mulder, and then his wife,
Tina
Mulder.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So so that's Mulder's biological mother. That is, no funny business there. She birthed him, but she apparently cheated on her husband with cigarette-smoking man.
Mm-hmm.
And so she, at first, when you're introduced to her in the earlier seasons, she's kind of just out there spacey. Not spacey, that's not the right word.
No, she's always, I never really liked her character because, again, the whole, I felt like she was always pulling, like Mulder would go help her out or what. I don't know. I feel like she was so needy all the time. I don't know. Whatever.
She was needy?
I don't know. And he would come home and help her and take care of her all the time. And she just was not assisting anybody. I feel like we'll talk about her in a second. But I feel like Scully's mom actually tried to freaking help out. She tried to step up and do some things. And Tina was just oh, my life. And it was well, you cheated on your husband, so whatever.
She was she was all drama, right?
She really was. I was not a huge fan of Tina. Whatever.
No,
so,
that's
R.I.P. Tina Mulder. But
yeah. So Tina Mulder. Because what season does she pass away in?
I forget, but it's not too far in.
No, I feel like it's later.
5th or 6th.
I think it's 8 even.
Is it? No.
7, maybe
no,
7.
Because he was gone. Yeah.
Maybe 7, but still later in the series.
Yeah. She's there, and she doesn't, come back too often. But yeah, she's gone.
All right, so that's the Mulders. Let's talk the Scullys. I feel like the Scullys play a role, but probably not as much as Mulder as far as the overall conspiracy.
Yeah.
They just, they happen to be, for lack of a better word, innocent bystanders in a lot of this. So Scully, Dana Scully, once again, played by Gillian Anderson, has several siblings, 3 siblings, 2 of which are featured. Two of which we meet on screen. And then, of course, you got, both parents at first. Bill Scully, her father, also her brother's name, Bill Scully. And funnily enough, William, which is Dana's child, which, again, totally forgot to talk about Scully's, illegitimate child that she had, last time. And then her mother, Margaret Scully.
Yes.
And then her sister,
Melissa.
Melissa Scully. Yes, exactly. So all these, I'll say this. If I had to choose a family that I was a part of between the Scullys and the Mulders, I would choose the Scullys.
Yes, the Mulders did seem like just a hot, ripe pile of garbage trash.
Yes.
But
I feel
the
like
Scullys tried. I mean, so her dad, Bill, was Navy, I want to say.
Yes.
Military. And so he ran a tight ship, if you will, no pun intended.
Yeah.
And that does play a factor. She does mention it and how she always felt like she was letting him down, but it was only because he was like that because of his military background. He did love her and the other kids. He just maybe came across a little harsher than he'd like.
Right.
But he dies within the first couple episodes.
The first 5 episodes, I think.
He's gone.
You meet him once, and then he
is the center of an actual X-File situation, or part of it. And so that's the dad, the 2 siblings that you meet, Bill Jr. I love, it's hilarious because Bill Jr. hates Mulder with a flaming freaking passion.
Well, because he blames him for all of...
Every time they're on screen together, you wait for them to get into a fist fight, because he just blames Mulder, which, I mean, whatever. Yeah, half the reason why there's all this tragedy is, that's fair. That tracks. But Bill Jr. hates Mulder with a flaming passion.
Yeah.
He winds up getting married and having a kid or 2, I think. You don't really see them in the later seasons. And then her sister is another one that dies towards the beginning because she is mistaken for Scully. And so a hitman
once again
takes out the wrong.
But who is the hitman?
Oh,
Isn't
it's Krychek.
It's
yes.
Krychek, yeah.
Son
of a bitch.
Yeah, I know. You loathe him entirely. But anyway, takes out Melissa very early on. And then there's Charlie, the third sibling, but you never actually meet him. He's mentioned, but that's really...
He has a speaking role in the reboot series, right?
Yes,
because
he does for like 5 seconds.
He's not on screen, but he's on the phone.
He's on the phone, so that's it. So those are the siblings. We forgot, or we mentioned Margaret Scully. She lasts until season 11.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Before they kill her character off. And like I said, I feel like of the two moms, she tries really hard. Especially when Scully's pregnant and when she's going through her cancer scare in the earlier seasons. She's always sitting there like watching William in season 9 because she all of a sudden has to run back and do something, so she's watching the baby, she's doing this, she's doing that. So I feel like Margaret Scully really tries, and unfortunately, I don't know why, when I was growing up, I used to confuse her with Sally Field, and I don't know why. So I feel like she's just the poor man Sally Field, the lady who
like a
played...
Wish.com Sally Field.
I don't know why. Maybe that's just me. If you thought the same thing,
no.
Whatever.
I mean, I not until you mentioned it did I not get that vibes. I mean,
but I always used to get them confused when I was a kid. I was like, wait, aren't they the same person? I don't know why. Probably because of dark hair and they're white women. I don't know.
She's the We Have Sally Field at home.
Right?
Yeah.
Like the off-brand, like freaking, Happy O's instead of Cheerios or whatever.
Yeah, she's the malto meal of Sally Fields.
Anyway.
I forget her. Honestly, I feel terrible. I forget the actress's real life name. But I was just reading about it before we started recording. So I guess she was married to one of the producers of X-Files.
Oh, well, good for her.
Yeah, right. No, so I mean, I'm wondering if that was how she had the connection there. To
maybe who knows? I never really looked into her, but
no. I mean, and again,
but you know what? Mother of the Year. So Boss of the Year goes to Walter Skinner. Mother of the Year goes to Margaret Scully.
100%.
I just have to say the two of them.
Yeah.
I mean, their backs are just breaking because they're holding everything up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I would say there's probably not really a Father of the Year. I think that's probably safe to say, right?
Yeah, no.
Because Scully's dad's gone too soon, and then Mulder's dad, and then his real dad, obviously not the greatest of people. So.
And then Mulder never even really gets to be a dad.
Correct. Yeah.
So
that leads us to the last character we want to discuss very briefly, and that is William, because in the original run, he only exists essentially in season 9. I mean, he's born at the end of season 8.
Yeah.
Like the finale. He's around in season 9 as a baby, and
comes back in 11.
Comes back in season 11, which again takes place in 2015. Many years later, so we'll get to that here at the end. But a character that we want to highlight real quick, he's obviously a big part of the later seasons in terms of his purpose, which by that point is so far off the beaten path from what you originally got
I'm not a huge fan of how they wrapped that up.
None of it made sense, and so
no, it didn't. And they've been very clear that they're not going to have. They were thinking of a season 12, but then I think. The actors made it clear that wasn't going to happen. And then, so it was just like a lot of like, what did you do? But anyway.
So all right.
The baby.
That's the baby. Exactly.
The baby.
All right. So before we get into talking about those later seasons briefly, because they weren't part of our childhood, right?
No,
they were, so I don't want to, dive too deep.
Fair.
I do want to talk about 2 movies that came out during our childhood and young adult years.
Mm-hmm.
One of these movies actually is came out during the series run between seasons 5 and 6. That is X-Files, just called X-Files actually, but I believe the fan title is X-Files Fight the Future.
Yes.
That was never the official title for it though.
I didn't know that.
I did not either until So, and then the other one came out 10 years later, 2008, well after the original series run ended. That is X-Files I Want to Believe. Another classic title there. So we're going to kind of go through both of these, share our thoughts, and maybe we'll talk about which one we like better, and kind of, I don't know, go from there. So X-Files Fight the Future, as it was known by fans, came out in 1998. Let's start with a little plot summary here. Before we do, I do want to say that this is actually considered a mythology film. So when it comes to X-Files, this film fits into the overarching alien mythology, right? Versus a monster of the week. This movie essentially, this is like a segue between seasons 5 and 6. Like, you need to have seen this to understand some of the plot points going forward after season 6. Now, they do a very good job of kind of highlighting and showing scenes. Funnily enough, it was kind of cool. Like, if you didn't see the movie, but you saw the show, like, they would show clips from the movie during future flashbacks for the show to like catch you up. Yeah, but anyway, let's get into the plot here. So the film begins in 35,000 BC during the Ice Age, where cavemen hunters encounter an extraterrestrial life form in North Texas, leading to a deadly encounter. Fast forward to 1998, a boy in the same area is infected by a black substance, triggering a mysterious chain of events. FBI agents Mulder and Scully, investigating a bomb threat, stumble upon a staged bombing meant to cover up alien-related deaths. The victims were in fact infected by an alien virus.
The black oil.
Character named Dr. Kurzweil informed Mulder that the victims were in fact already dead and that the bombing was a cover-up. The cigarette-smoking man in Texas oversees experiments on an infected firefighter. Meanwhile, Mulder and Scully travel to Texas to investigate, finding a playground was built over this site. Following clues, they discover a cornfield with glowing domes that release a swarm of deadly bees. Back in D.C., Scully, meanwhile, is transferred, and Mulder discovers a vaccine against the virus. Scully is stung by a bee, falls unconscious, and is taken away. Mulder, aided by allies, learns that Scully's location and revives her with the vaccine. In Antarctica, they find a facility with humans suspended in ice-like enclosures. The duo disrupts the facility, leading to the emergence of a massive alien vessel. The film climaxes with a big escape by Mulder and Scully as the alien ship takes off. At a hearing later on, Scully's testimony is ignored, of course, and the evidence is destroyed. She hands over a bee, which is the only proof, to Mulder, acknowledging the FBI's inability to investigate. Outside, Mulder reads a cover-up article. Scully commits to working with Mulder despite the challenges. And finally, in Tunisia, the cigarette-smoking man warns of Mulder's threat and reveals the reopening of the X-Files unit as credits roll. Yep. Wow, let's start there. So much happens, and then so much doesn't happen, which is so much in like just typical X-Files fashion with these mythology episodes where you get so close to saying, oh my God, finally the truth will be revealed, right? Yep. How many times at this point, up until this point?
Telling you, just having a frickin' Fujifilm camera, whatever. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, something. So,
just have a goddamn camcorder.
Yeah, so,
anyway.
I mean, it's, okay, your thoughts. So when did you see this movie in theaters?
I didn't ever see it in theaters. No,
okay.
I did. I was a Blockbuster,
rental.
Yeah.
But like you had already seen the show by that, so obviously
and again, it was all out of order.
Yeah.
The one thing I will that I wanted to start out with, I guess, is that it was very funny. So there's the scene that you referenced with the bee and the sting. There were two different shots for that.
Yep.
One had Mulder and Scully actually like full on kiss. They're like making out in the hallway.
And then she gets stung by the bee.
And then, And then they had another take where like literally just milliseconds. And Chris Carter decided to go with that one because he said the roar in the, like, because I guess he ran like a test whatever test screening of it. And the roar in the theater from the other scene of like, are you freaking kidding me? He was like, oh yeah, that's where. So I was like, F you. But anyway, you can find the other scene. It's on the internet.
I think it's on like deleted scenes probably in the DVD.
Yeah, it's around. It's floating around the internet too.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he, of course, true to form, didn't want to make it, where they have this moment where she's like, she wants to walk away, but he's like, I need you. And she's like, oh my gosh. And she realizes that she needs him too. And they're about to lean in and you're like, yes, it's happening. And then the bee stings her and then she goes unconscious. So yeah, that's the first thing that I feel like begs to be discussed.
Yeah. The biggest cock block of the entire series, potentially.
Right.
The first thing I know, so the first time I saw this was with you for our X-Files journey, right? Yeah. And so the first thing I noticed and was so excited about was that this truly felt like a big movie, like a big experience. Now, up until then, the series always felt like, again, we talked about it last time, everything felt like it was in Vancouver, right? Because it was, right? They filmed in one general location. This is the first time that they really film in multiple locations all over the world. And the big thing I noticed was that there were so many of these kind of wide shots, right? Zoomed out shots just to show the scale.
How big it was.
Yeah, right? And so, I mean, kind of just doing some research on this as far as pre-production. So basically, you had 5 great seasons. Chris Carter decided he wanted to essentially create a film to tell the X-Files story on a broader scale. I think both literally and figuratively, as it turns out, because again, there's so many different locations involved. It's just, it feels big. It feels like a movie, right? Which is because the show always felt like a movie to me. I think compared to other shows at that time, it holds up very well for that reason, that it feels very cinematic. But this just takes it to that next level where you're like, this is a movie. This is legit. It's what you want. If a TV show gets a movie treatment, this is what it should be.
For sure.
So apparently they wrote this script while over in Hawaii for Christmas back in '96. So they started working on it, I guess, during season 4 or whatever that would have been.
Nice.
So they knew they were going to write it. They apparently wrote all the script points on index cards and kind of pieced them together.
Yeah.
And then by the time they got back from Hawaii and Christmas break, I think they wrote about half of the script, which ended up being about 125 pages. In about 10 days, they wrote that. So that was pretty cool.
That's insane.
Now, this I thought was interesting. So they wanted to keep it a secret, right? A lot of times when you have a popular movie franchise or whatever, and you don't want leaks to happen, you'll give it like a nickname. So in this case, they called it Project Blackwood. I don't know what that means. I guess just totally threw them off the scent. But I thought this was very interesting. They actually printed the script on red paper to avoid being able to photocopy it.
Oh, wow.
Because if you think about it, if you're copying something that's colored or whatever, like off, not white, essentially, it shows up as black on the thing, so you can't photocopy it.
Ooh,
so I thought that was kind of cool.
Very X-Files-y.
Right, in and of itself.
Like
that's
classified documentation.
I'm surprised more, FBI files aren't printed on red paper, because
maybe they are. You don't know. You've never seen actual classified documents, now have you, sir?
Well, not that I know of. Yeah, that's fair. So, but again, just talking about kind of that pre-production. So the casting, obviously, we talked about him wanting to make the film bigger. Starting and ending it at an extreme place. We got the Arctic, right, which is just this. You had the Arctic a little bit in some of the episodes, right, because they would go to cold places. But again, it was very kind of like small. This definitely felt bigger. And of course, what was great about this movie is they brought back all your favorite actors. You had, of course, Mulder and Scully. You had Cigarette Smoking Man. You had Skinner come back as a pretty big part in this. You brought in a couple other characters, that were just used for the film. Martin Landau. I forget who the name of his character, but he was like that. Almost like an informant that kind of helped Mulder
the Critchkow guy?
Yeah. And then he dies, of course, because why not? So, but I think that was kind of cool, and so it's what I thought was interesting was not only that, but they also, for the side characters, cast known actors. I think X-Files was always known for casting people that would eventually become famous, and we didn't even talk about that last week, I don't think. Like, how many...
Oh, yeah, Jack Black was in a...
Ryan Reynolds was in an
Ryan
X-Files.
Reynolds
Seth Green.
Yep.
Like, how
many... Dave Grohl in an episode?
I think Dave
something?
Grohl. Yeah, Dave
like,
Grohl.
That's insane.
How many famous actors started on the X-Files?
Yeah.
That should be its own thing for a future episode.
Yeah.
So anyway, but in this, of course, in the movie, they cast several well-known actors in these supporting roles.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, which is fine, you know what I mean? But I thought that was an interesting choice there as well. But so funnily enough, so they filmed in Los Angeles, which actually was used for both Dallas and London. It was all filmed in LA. And then they actually they did go back to Canada for filming the scenes. So the ice scenes were originally supposed to be filmed in Alaska, but I'm guessing from either for a scheduling or budgeting purposes, they move it to Whistler, British Columbia. So not Vancouver, but Whistler.
Oh, never even heard of that place.
Exactly. Yeah. So they started filming mid 1997. So I guess whenever that would have been during the filming of season 5.
Oh, that must have been an insane.
Well, actually, no. Here it is. So it was actually filmed between the show's 4th and 5th seasons.
Oh, okay. Because that still must have been an insane schedule for them. But
but that also, I think, further emphasizes why you had these characters that were in season 5, like Agent Spender and Agent Fowley, not even mentioned in this, because they were filmed. This movie was done before they even filmed that.
Yeah.
So maybe they didn't know where they were going with it yet.
That's fair, yeah.
But I thought this was interesting too, is because of the film's demands on the actors' schedules, some of the episodes in season 5 only featured Mulder or Scully and very little of the other character because they were shooting different scenes for the movie.
I'd never even thought about it.
See?
That's crazy.
I know.
The more you know, right? The more you know.
There it is. Now, the question we're all wondering is, what did critics and the box office say about this film when it was released in theaters? Well, I'll tell you this. It was released in, again, we talked about, coming out in mid-1998. It earned a total of almost $190 million worldwide.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, opening weekend, by the way, about $30 million in its opening weekend.
Okay.
This is back in 98. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, considering,
Yep. So it was, let's see,
Inflation
it was
that.
actually number 10 for all PG-13 films released that year.
Wow, okay, top
So
10.
pretty decent.
All right.
Critics were pretty mixed on it as far as reviews. I think Rotten Tomatoes has it at about 66% right now. So not bad. I mean, and we'll get to the next movie here in a second. It's actually pretty good then, comparatively speaking.
Right.
But I mean, big highlights, of course, were Mulder and Scully. David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson did a great job. Love their chemistry together. So all in all, I mean, positive film. And definitely a very good step in the right direction from a mythology standpoint.
For sure.
Let me ask you, I mean, can you recommend this movie to people that are, I guess it's a two-parter. Do you recommend this to X-Files fans?
Yes, of course. You have to watch it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you recommend this as a standalone film to somebody who had never seen the X-Files series?
No, I feel because it does have some of the, you'd be a little lost.
So that's where the mythology part actually is a detriment.
Yeah,
as far as
because
new
you'd
audience.
be like, what is happening?
So this movie was definitely made for people who and rewarded them for following
I
the
think
show.
they even referenced the clone program in it as well.
Yeah.
Which had been, like we said, was, they had there was a little boy or something and he was a mute, but there were multiple of them working the fields where the bees were. And
yes.
So they referenced the clone program that they had talked about with Samantha. So yeah, no, unfortunately.
Yeah, this is one if you're really going to enjoy it.
I feel like it's fair that they gave it a 60 because 60% on Rotten Tomatoes. Because again, if you weren't a fan, it wouldn't have made sense to you.
Correct. As a standalone film, it's
you would have
fine.
been very confused.
Yeah. It is. It's almost like if you're watching a movie trilogy and you start with the second movie. You're like,
right, you're
what the hell's going on?
Freak, how did we get here? Yeah.
Because then I love that and I'll see if I can find the trailer for it for the intro of this show. So if you're listening to this and that's what I got, then I found it. If it's something else, sorry, I didn't find it. But I like how the season premiere of season 6, which came out after this, they talk about previously on X-Files, and they essentially show the big plot points of the film, for the trailer,
the recap. Yeah.
The recap. That's what it is. So I thought that was kind of cool. So I mean, if you could theoretically, you could skip the movie and just watch the show and be just fine.
Yeah.
You can't skip the show and watch this movie and expect to get as much out of it.
Yes, that is a fair point.
So there it is. All right. Well, that is X-Files Fight the Future. And I personally recommend it. I think it's great, and I agree with everything you just said as far as you can't really enjoy it unless you've watched the rest of the series up until this point. Or at least caught the highlights of it, which in 2023 is very easy to do if you don't want to go slog through 5 seasons of X-Files, which we talked about this before. I want to go back and watch the X-Files again. I would rewatch it to get to the movie again.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Anyway, all right. So that's Fight the Future in 98. Let's fast forward 10 years to the second feature film with our favorite FBI agents, Mulder and Scully. We're talking about X-Files, I Want to Believe.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this one came out 5 years after the ending, or no, I guess it was 6 years after the end of the initial run of the series.
Yes, it did.
And as such, this is actually the total opposite of the first movie, where this is not a mythology episode, because theoretically by then...
I think he probably took the, kind of the critiques and was like, okay, well, let me try it this way,
Well, either that, or I feel like it was maybe there was no intention of going back to mythology because they kind of wrapped it up with season 9.
Maybe he didn't think he
and
would
there wasn't
ever
a story
get
there.
10 and 11 ever.
Yeah.
That's fair.
So anyway, but let me just let's jump into so we'll jump into the plots of I Want to Believe here, and then we'll share our thoughts on it. So X-Files, I Want to Believe in 2008. In this film, former FBI agent Dana Scully is approached by Agent Mosley Drummy to locate her fugitive ex-partner Fox Mulder in exchange for calling off of the FBI manhunt, which is a plot point from season 9. At the end of the series.
So you do, yeah, I guess that's the one thing.
Mulder is on the run at the end of season 9, and so it kind of picks up with that here, and it's kind of, yeah.
I'll talk about that in a second.
There we go, yeah. So they are tasked with investigating the disappearance of women in West Virginia, including FBI Special Agent Monica Bannon. The investigation leads them to Father Joe, a defrocked priest who claims to have visions of the crimes. Father Joe aids the FBI in discovering a frozen burial ground connecting the crimes to organ transporter Yankee Dakishin and his husband Franz Tomschezen. I'm totally pronouncing those wrong.
Probably.
I don't really care. The duo traces them to a medical team running a gruesome operation stealing organs from victims. During a confrontation at a compound, Mulder is injected with a tranquilizer and faces imminent death. Meanwhile, Scully seeks help of her former superior, assistant director, Walter Skinner, and together they locate Mulder.
Boss of the Year.
Boss of the Year, once again. In dramatic fashion, Scully incapacitates Doc Shin, preventing the beheading of a young woman. Later, Mulder learns that Father Joe has died at the same moment Scully disconnected life support for Tom Sessions' severed head, hinting at a mysterious connection. The movie concludes with Mulder and Scully rowing towards a tropical island in a post-credits scene, signaling a respite from their intense investigative journey. The narrative blends elements of crime, mystery, and supernatural, exploring the dark world of organ trafficking while highlighting the enduring partnership of Mulder and Scully. So, again, the first thing there is it's a Monster of the Week episode.
Yes, it is. And like I said, I wasn't a huge fan because, okay, so at the end of season 9, they all freaking help him break out of jail, and everybody knows it, right? And so somehow Scully is able to just go and practice medicine. They all know, like, let's think about this. Who would be like the number one person of suspicion when Mulder's broken out of a freaking high profile military prison? It would be his partner / lover, and somehow she's just practicing fucking medicine. You open the scene and she's working for a private Catholic hospital.
Yep.
She's a surgeon. She's fine. He's in hiding, but I'm like, how? It doesn't make whatever. And then all of a sudden, even though he supposedly murdered a man, never got acquitted of it, and then broke out of a military prison, they're like, hey, all is forgiven if you just solve this weird freaking puzzle. And I was like, that's bullshit. Like, whatever. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that. It was a bullshit, like, weak sauce.
So how would you, okay, so, I'll put it on you. How would you have written that to bring Mulder and Scully back together for this?
I don't know. I'm not a writer. I don't freaking know. But all I know is that IRL, if that shit really happened, okay, all is forgiven. And how the hell did she get a license practicing medicine when she was like a number one suspect breaking his motherfucking ass out of jail? I'm just saying.
That's fair.
Doesn't make no sense. Make it make sense, please.
All right. Well, let's skip the confusing opening then. Let's get right into the reason that they get back together here. What are your thoughts? Let's start with, the Father Joe, right? Because that's an actor. Father Joe, played by actor Billy Connolly.
One of my faves.
You may know him from such films as The Boondock Saints.
Yep, another great one.
And, well, that's all I know him from. So, we're not talking about Boondock Saints today, thank God, because it's one of my least favorite movies of all time. But I think he does a great job as Father Joe.
Oh, I love Billy Connolly. He's awesome. He gave me sort of vibes also of Brent Spiner's character from Independence Day, where he's the weird doctor, like he's got the stringy white hair and he's just kind of like,
he looks like him, he doesn't act like him.
I feel like he is just kind of a little aloof and weird about it. But anyway, so he plays this like priest who's actually like a pedo.
Yeah.
And so Scully already like hates him, doesn't believe him, doesn't trust him, thinks he's, BSing because he just wants to like get out of, the fact that he's just a nasty person, gross, nasty person. And so, yeah, she already has a very like absolutely not vibe with him.
Right.
And then, Mulder, true to form, is like, this is for real. This is happening. We're gonna
Yeah.
So that's how, it starts out.
And so, yeah, one thing leads to another, and turns out, oh, hey, we found this group of people that are harvesting organs and doing it for essentially to save this person's life, right?
Well, no, it's for the husband's life. The one, because he was dying of something. They may have mentioned what, I don't remember if they did or whatever. It wasn't a huge plot point, but basically all that's left is his head.
Yeah.
And so they just keep, the other guy keeps just carving up people and putting what he needs into them. And so he's just being held alive by...
Well, so I would say, they're trying to do
bubblegum and Band-Aids.
Yeah, they're trying to do a head transplant, which, I mean, and it's funny too, because X-Files has never shied away from showing graphic stuff, even the show, right? There's some scenes in the show,
some gruesome things
where it's hard to look at, right? But I tell you what, there's something about the scene, because there's a scene in this where you see a severed, them basically getting his head surgically removed to transport over to this other body.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is kind of fucked up. This is...
Yes, it is.
It's creepy.
It's very... Okay, so I will say the other thing is the coloration and the overall whatever of it is a lot darker than the
lighting
other
and
movie.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. I guess the saturation of the...
Yeah. Well, this one feels grittier, and, there's no...
But it's very dark, yeah.
Well, and that's the other thing, too, is other than Father Joe being a psychic, which is technically still never proven, I mean, I guess sort of, but not, this isn't really a fantastical show. This is this is almost like an NCIS episode, or a, you know what I mean, an SVU episode. I don't know, SVU. I don't watch any of those shows, but I feel like it's a typical police procedural type show.
Yeah, there's something happening. Legit, people are getting carved up,
right?
And that's not good.
But it's not an X-File.
No, that part's not, because the organ trafficking part happens.
Yeah,
as awful as it
but it's
sounds.
almost because, again, we talked about it before. Mulder, before getting into the X-Files, was part of the Violent Crimes Division.
Mm-hmm.
And that's almost what they're trying to, capitalize on and utilize here.
Yes,
versus his
he was very good. He was a well-known profiler. That was
exactly
what his skill set was.
And so
that's what they wanted him for, was his profiling skills.
It's just because, again, there's no X-File here. I think that's the part that I think people were frustrated.
Connolly character, I feel like maybe they just threw in to be like, oh, we need to make it spooky. Here you go.
Yeah,
but
they could have discovered this.
But it was a legitimate. It was a legitimate case. It was a legitimate problem. There were people disappearing in back alleys. They were turning up dead with organs missing. I mean, you can't really make that.
No, absolutely not.
You can't fudge that.
No, but again, it's not an X-File.
No, it's not.
And that's why I think people were kind of pissed at this movie.
And it also showed Mulder and Scully were at odds. Most of it arguing. They were ready to, call it quits, and it was just everything about it was just very gruesome, dark, depressing. You come off that movie, and even though the end scene, like you said, where they're going towards they tried to be oh, look, it's happy now, where they're going on vacation to Hawaii, and you're like, oh my God, I need a minute.
Yeah.
Because I'm depressed.
It's very dark.
It's very dark.
It is. So let's talk about kind of what went into making this film. So this movie actually was first discussed back in 2001.
Interesting.
Only a couple years after the first movie, they were planning a second X-Files film. Now, I think initially it was
they couldn't get everybody on board, I don't think.
Well, that and initially it was supposed to be a mythology film where it was going to continue. So basically, production was scheduled for after the series wrapped season 9. They were actually looking at a December 2003 release. So this was going to be a continuation, and then eventually Chris Carter decided he'd rather do a standalone film and not necessarily tie it to the whole mythology there.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how things went, and so it just took a few years to get off the ground, but that's really what happened.
Fair.
It sounds like there were negotiations that were happening in 2004 with challenges to get the sequel out there. Apparently, David Duchovny kind of outlined the initial premise of the film in 2005, which focused on a case totally not related to alien life. They were going to start shooting in 2005 initially and come out in 2006. There was no real script by 2006. And so anyway, it was a nightmare getting this film. They finally got a script in development back in mid-2007.
Okay.
So it was crazy. Now, what I do love about this movie is that it was filmed in our favorite place, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Exactly. And I honestly, I think that according to interviews, the decision to shoot in Vancouver was influenced heavily by its significance to both Chris Carter and David Duchovny, which is funny because
he wanted to leave.
He wanted to leave, and it's one of those. I guess it's like a love-hate relationship.
Nostalgia.
Yeah, like it was. And what was really cool is that filming in Vancouver allowed a lot of former crew members from the TV series to come back and help make the movie because work visas and all that stuff
That's
being
fair,
in Canada. But apparently, and I didn't catch this, either because I'd have to rewatch it. But there were a lot of so Mulder is working out of his home office now, right? He does, because he didn't work for the FBI anymore. But apparently, there were things in his office that were like little nods to the previous, episodes and seasons. So, for example, there was I don't know what this means, so maybe you can refresh my memory. But there was, I guess, a carrot juice bottle. Is there something with carrot juice that was okay? I don't remember that either.
Maybe.
But they're saying that was, but they're saying there was some artwork from Monica Reyes in his office.
Oh, interesting. I'd have to go back and look at that. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't catch that. Okay.
I thought that was kind of cool. So
well, they did her dirty, but whatever.
Right? Yeah. So
we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
Did her dirty.
Yeah, I know. I know. So how did the film do? The sequel, X-Files, I Want to Believe, earned $4 million on its opening day and opened fourth in the weekend in its opening weekend, grossing $10.2 million. So far cry. Well, the original one grossed $30 million.
Oh, that's fair.
This one only grossed $10 million.
Okay.
Its entire theatrical run worldwide concluded with a total gross of only $68 million.
Okay.
So now they're saying that it was because it was up against The Dark Knight, which came out at the same time.
Oh yeah, you really can't screw with Batman.
No, you really can't.
You know, I mean, Batman's Batman, guys.
Yeah. Now, fortunately, home media release on DVD and Blu-ray, including the extended cut, brought it up to, an additional almost $17 million in post-release sales. So at least there's that.
Hopefully, I mean, they recouped at least the cost of the film, right?
I think they did, yeah. So I mean, financially, it was successful, just not nearly as successul as the first one.
That's fair.
Critics agreed it's only got a 31% rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Yeah. A lot of people are criticizing the plot, calling it muddled, hurried, half-baked.
I wouldn't disagree.
I would say you can't really disagree with that. But all in all, in your opinion, could you recommend this to fans of the series?
Oh, a fan. Yeah. Like I feel like you just have to. Like it's just part of, you just have to. Yeah.
Is it as enthusiastic of a recommend as the first movie?
No.
Okay.
No, so definitely not. But it's like you feel like you have to, you have to go through it. You have to go through the motions.
Sure. Now, for a non-X-Files fan, could you recommend this movie?
That would not be the first thing that I show somebody to
really
make them a fan. I don't know.
Well, okay, but again, we talked about the last film being like you had to watch the series to really appreciate it. Whereas,
yes, but I guess I just feel like you don't see the best. It's not the best of what the X-Files had to offer. You know what I mean?
That's fair.
And I think that's what it is. I feel like there are definite standalone episodes that I would show somebody first to be like, "Hey, this is what this show's about." Versus this movie, I feel like you
doesn't really paint that picture.
You just have to watch it if you're a fan.
Yeah,
like it's an obligation.
It's kind of like the later seasons are.
It's obligatory.
Yeah. So okay, well, let me ask you this then. Objectively speaking, let's say if this was not an X-Files movie, let's say this whole plot was just some random thriller movie. Could you recommend it based on that, with the whole organ harvesting and all that?
I mean,
did you like it as a story?
I mean, yeah, because it was, like I said, I think what was cool about it was that, and I think I referenced this last time, is that some of the stuff, like, they did sometimes, like, some of it, was fantastical, but some things it was like, oh shit, that could really happen. Like,
yes.
That could really freaking happen.
Yeah.
And so, from that standpoint, like, it's a thing of nightmares that people just, like, freaking kidnap you and, like, cut out your liver and sell it and all this crazy shit. Like, that's freaking scary, you know?
I'm pretty sure that was a plot point of one of the actual episodes in the series.
Well, it was a monster who needed it for his, whatever, which he's supposed to be back this year. It's 2023.
Really? That's true.
Toombs is coming back.
Well, I was even talking about that episode Hell Money, where people were giving up their organs for money.
Oh,
that actually had no monsters.
That's another one that is, it was like that was not
wasn't
X-Files
an X-File
one at all. That was just a weird Chinese mafia selling organs. But anyway.
And it's interesting because I know this movie was written by Chris Carter, so it was intended to be an X-Files movie, but it almost feels like without all that kind of bullshit at the beginning there and just focusing on two random cops investigating organ harvesting, like, it could be a lot of fun. Like, this could have been a really good movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's because of what they stood for that it just kind of fell flat.
Yeah. I would agree.
That's
with
probably what it was.
I would still watch it though. Like I would
No,
recommend
it's
seeing
good.
it.
It wasn't terrible. Like I said,
No.
it wasn't terrible. I mean, but yeah, comparatively. But I honestly also, I think coming off of season 9, I had it so built up in my head, and they never referenced William at all at that point.
Yeah.
Like, and I just had it so built up in my head after the series finale that I was just kind of, I think I was let down because I was like, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck? Like,
it's literally
it was
nothing.
so weak that you like got him out of like, exile. And then you don't even address half the shit that went down in the 9th season. So whatever.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And I feel like, unfortunately, because it came out so much later than the series wrapped, I think the further out it was, the less likely Chris Carter wanted to tie it to.
And that's fair. Yeah. Because he was like, well, nobody remembers it anyway,
Yeah.
Like, so.
Nobody liked it, really.
Yeah.
Because that last season, man, it was the original one. It was rough.
It was rough.
So those are the movies. Before we wrap up, let's just touch. I don't want to go into a lot of detail on the reboots, not reboots, but I guess there are technically seasons in the series.
They're considered 10 and 11.
Seasons 10, season 11. In 2015, 2016, they brought the X-Files
18.
back. Was it 18?
It was 16 and 18, I think.
Was there a year in between?
I think
Maybe.
So. Yeah.
Okay, you're probably right. I don't know. Either way, much later, we were well into our 30s by the time.
Speak for yourself. No, I'm
or
just
were
kidding.
we? I guess we were about 30.
Yeah,
Anyway,
ass.
whatever. You were 30. I was probably 29. Anyway, you were pumped when that came back. Like and at that point, I hadn't really watched the series, so I wasn't excited.
No, well, because like I said, I felt like he had screwed the pooch a little bit in the movie. Didn't mention certain people. Like there's no mention of Reyes or Doggett. The Skinners in the movie, but William, none of that. So I was like so excited. I was like, all right, we're finally gonna get that wrap up, and maybe these motherfuckers are gonna get a happy ending finally. Did that happen?
No.
Fuck no. Like the exact opposite of that actually freaking happened.
Yeah. So
but
they had 2 seasons to right the wrongs.
To try to fix all that, and they wound up somehow he wound up fucking it further, and I don't know how.
I agree.
I was like, how can you? How?
Well, and again, like, so I'll tell you how and like what they did specific. Why they did it, I don't know, but I'll tell you.
I guess why. The how we know. It's the why. I guess.
Why, yeah.
You're right. Why,
so,
Chris? Why?
For those of you who gave up on the X-Files before these new seasons came out, I'll just put it to you straight. Everything you were led to believe for the first 9 seasons was bullshit.
Yeah,
it was all fake.
So basically what they said is that the aliens did crash in Roswell, New Mexico in the 40s, but beyond that, they just they stole all the technology and basically made replicas. So any other UFOs that were seen were replicas, and the super soldiers and all that were all just man-made. And so basically the syndicate was even more entrenched in than they really.
Such bullshit.
Yeah. So basically any alien stuff was all man-made. The aliens did exist and did crash, but that's where it ended.
That's where it ended. Like the whole series. So like in the original run, there was a whole plot line of like, there's this alien species that's going to be invading Earth. There's these like alien bounty hunters and all this shit, which they never reference. They never talk about that, right? Because there's a dude who literally can shapeshift. That's apparently man-made. Like what? It's such bullshit.
There's holes in that.
So
plot.
if you and if this is a big if you can get past that and finish the seasons, which they're not very long, they're like half the size of the original run.
Mm-hmm.
It still sucks.
Well, then they also, so the whole thing that kind of the shippers were hanging on to was the fact that Mulder and Scully did have a child. They do reference William. They do find William. Turns out, apparently, that the father is none other than the nastiest man known to mankind is cigarette smoking man.
Yes.
Supposedly in a season 7 episode off screen, they imply, or he says that he's the reason that she was pregnant. Now, you can take it. Some people have said that they've interpreted it as he was the man with the science behind it. So he says that he fathered William because he made it possible for her to conceive because he was, in control of the chip. But I went back and watched the episode, and it pretty much sounds like he done.
No, they made it pretty clear
what
he
did.
What he implies that he did. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, he's evil and you can't really believe him. So he, again, as some people are like, well, he's a liar. So you can't. So whatever. So believe what you will. Either way, I can't even believe that was even a thing. And they give this to he gives this to poor Skinner, who has to like swallow this information.
Yeah.
And fucking like take it and be like, what the hell? Yeah. And then they wind up killing William off at the end, but not really because he services. And then freaking Scully's pregnant again. And this is like in her late 40s.
Yeah, that's even more dangerous.
And you're like, what the hell?
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of just, wow. There was wow.
I will say this. The Monster of the Week episodes in the latest seasons were fantastic for the most part.
Oh yeah, there were some
of the best. In fact, Darren Morgan comes back to write an episode each season.
The Weremonster one,
the Weremonster, and then the Art of Forehead Sweat.
That one's hilarious.
Which is like a cool, like they kind of like retro. What's the term?
It's the Mandela effect.
Yeah, exactly. So like, oh, like this didn't actually happen. Whatever. They were great, right? They were, and there was a couple other
funny. We were laughing.
Yeah, but even that's just the other. There were some other Monster of the Week episodes that aren't mythology based.
But they effed the mythology. Oh, and then Monica Reyes, I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
They did her dirty. So basically, somehow she became part of she's working for the cigarette smoking man. Like when did that happen? How did that happen? And then they killed her. She's dead. Bye-bye.
Skinner kills her. And then, by the way, Skinner maybe
And then Skinner may be
dies.
dead because she runs into him because he kills her and she's driving a car, so she keeps driving. And then, like I said before, they did Dog It Dirty because they never even, he doesn't exist.
Doesn't
even though he worked with Scully, helped everybody out. So, yeah. So it was a mess. It was a disgusting mess. I'm sorry.
Yeah. The less said about those seasons, the better. And if we ever do what we talked about doing and review every single episode, be it for this podcast or just something we do on our own, I'm not looking forward to those. It's
a little rough. It's a little rough, but yeah. So all of that is kind of a trash can dumpster fire.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and there was plans on potentially having a 12th season, but Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny are like, yeah, we need to give these no. They couldn't agree on coming back. They wanted to give the characters a rest, which is fair because
100%.
They're older now and yeah. And so I don't know if Chris thought that he could wrap all this crap up as in 12, but either way, it's never going to happen, unfortunately.
No, it's not. Now, they supposedly, or maybe you mentioned it to me, they discussed a third movie to wrap it up.
Well, no. Yeah, well, and I've also heard of a reboot with Ryan Coogler.
Oh, the guy who did Black Panther. Yeah, he's going to reboot the series, but that's a reboot, though. That's not.
Yeah, so I don't know. I know, Gillian Anderson is having some, she's had success with the shows that she's been on recently, and so she's doing well. David Duchovny is, he's apparently he has a band and he's singing now. He's
living
touring.
His best life, man.
So he's having a great time doing what he loves because he's in a position now where he can just kind of, I think it's like just a passion project. You know, he's made enough money to be like, well, fuck it, I want to start a band. Go for it, buddy. So yeah, I don't know that their heads are really even in that. Like they've moved on. They want to try different things, which you cannot blame them. I mean, that's 25 years, 30 years of their lives that everybody was like, you're Fox Mulder, you're Dana Scully.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, no, we're people.
Yes. And so, yeah, I think they're ready to just, be themselves and not have to be.
Especially since freaking Chris Carter can't ever give them a happy fucking ending.
That's right. Yeah, that's true. So, what a journey. Man. Okay. Before we wrap up, just overall discussions, we talked about the series, we talked about the movies. We didn't really talk a lot about like the kind of the merchandise, right? That came out with it. I know there's a lot of books.
Oh yeah, the Barbies.
There's the Barbies, yeah. Did you read any of the books? I know you owned them. Did you ever read them?
I did read. I read a couple of them. I think the problem that I had with them is that in my head, for whatever reason, I couldn't put them in, like,
are they mythology or are they like Monster of the Weeks?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember the plots of them. I did read them, but I had a hard time putting them in that universe, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't hearing their voices in my head when I was reading it for whatever reason. Like it was
Yeah.
it was hard to get into the characters myself. Like,
Gotcha.
because I was so used to it being, so I feel like when you, like for Harry Potter, for example, going back to referencing that, like I
Sure.
read all the books first.
Yeah.
And I had their voices in my head already.
You were able to
first.
develop your own voices for them.
And then I saw the movies just because that's how it all came out. And so some were the same, some were different, but it was like I took them separately versus I had only ever seen visual whatever of the show. And then I tried to read a couple of books and it was just, I couldn't go. I feel like you can't go backwards. You can't do a movie or film and then read the book because it's just, versus going the other way, it enhances it, I guess, or I don't know. So that was my problem. I did pre-order. There is a book that's coming out that will come out around my birthday in the summer, supposedly, and I'm praying that this particular author can wrap this shit up for me in a way that Chris Carter could not. Supposedly, it is gonna wrap up all the freaking horse shit that happened.
Right.
So I have, even though I just said that I have trouble getting into them, I just need this, any closure. So I have high hopes that this summer by the pool, I will be able to finally get that closure.
Okay. Well, there it is. And you didn't play any like the video games or the computer games, right?
No, you know me. I was not a
you weren't a gamer.
I was not a gamer, so no. I did have some action figures that I had as like just on display. I didn't really play with them.
Yeah, no.
And then I did I wasn't a huge, like in retrospect now, I'm more of a Barbie fan. Well, not really, but anyway, in retrospect, I would have liked to have had the collector Barbies, but did not have those because I was like, ew, Barbies when I was a kid. So
yeah, okay,
but
yeah, all right, good stuff. So, would you say this is your favorite TV series of all time?
Yes,
like because I know you're also a Star Trek fan, and we will do an episode on Star Trek.
Yes, and I liked that too, but that was more so from the standpoint of like, that show I did legitimately watch with my dad. Like I did sort of watch this like once or twice with my dad. But honestly, he had kind of grown tired of it by the time I started watching. So, but yeah, the difference being that Star Trek is more nostalgic from the fact that it was time spent with my father versus this was for me. Like I legitimately liked the storyline until the end. And I legitimately liked the characters and just what was happening with it.
This was your thing, and so all right, well, fair. Yeah, because I mean, I don't know how long we were dating before it came out that you were an X-Files fan. It wasn't too long though. Like you were like, yeah, I love that show, and so. Yeah, because I remember we bought the Blu-rays and all that stuff, and we tried watching it a few times, and just I never did. And then finally,
you never got it. You didn't get into it.
It took me a few tries, and then finally this year, I was like, you know what? Fuck it, let's watch it, and we did, and we stuck with it. And there were times when it was a bit of a slog, but I think you'll agree, like it's
Oh yeah.
But all in all, yeah, I mean. Great show. I am looking forward to going back and rewatching it with you, which we will. I don't know when, but we will.
We'll do it.
And it'll be great. And so good stuff. And hey, I'm so glad we did this in 2 parts because we're over an hour again.
Cheese and rice.
I know, right? Can you imagine if we did this in one sitting?
Right?
We would have people turning out. Anyway, that's going to wrap up our X-Files discussion, guys. Certainly will not be the last time we talk X-Files on the show, but we're much like Chris Carter. We're going to let this rest for a little bit, I think. We do have plans for future discussions on maybe specific episodes or things like that. But, wanted to get this out there. This was a staple of growing up in the 90s and the early 2000s, and that's why we did it. And hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you stuck through it for both parts. I had a lot of fun talking about this with you, and
same.
Yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed it as well. Speaking of enjoyment, if you do like this podcast and you know somebody else who would, make sure they're listening to it. Let them know about it. They can get it on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you're listening to it. That's where they're going to get it, or they can get it elsewhere as well. Make sure you are checking us out on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, all at Generation S Podcast. You'll find the symbol there that we use on the artwork for this podcast there, so you'll know you're in the right place. And hey, if you get a chance, can you leave a review too? It doesn't take long, right? Yeah, on iTunes, go just leave a quick review, leave the stars. Spotify, same thing, leave a star review if you can. And it helps. What it does is it helps other people looking for a nostalgia podcast to at least give us a shot and see what they think. Because that's how we're going to keep growing. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Goodbye.